Nice. All right, welcome, ladies and gentlemen, my fellow runners, my Pan-Africans across the diaspora to another engaging episode of Rise Urban Nation, the podcast where we unite, uplift, and ignite each other. And in today's digital age where the dreams of Black and Pan-African communities are frequently sidelined, here at Rise Urban Nation, we emerge in these conversations to uplift stories as a guiding light of hope and empowerment. And it's more than just a podcast, y'all. It's the arms of unity, growth, and transformation. I'm your host, Taryell Simmons, and in this episode, we're going to embark on some revealing exploration into the realms of finance, African music, and cultural myths. You know who I got back in the studio with me, Ighosime, my brother Igho. What's up, my brother?
First of all, let me just say, thank you very much for having me back. I appreciate that, bottom of my heart. But I didn't know you.
Yeah.
So people who listen to this are called runners. Is that what we call it now?
I'm gonna call them the runners because we run the world, baby. We
R-U-N.
runners. And then if you
okay, good.
RUN runners, because see, Rise Urban Nation, that's run.
Yes,
I'm gonna call my community runners because we run the world literally.
I love
and
it.
if you look at the Black expression of runners, like because we wasn't allowed to have anything, they used to be little runners in the community. They used to run the books, the money, and all that stuff in our own little Black market. So it's a double entendre.
Oh, look at this poet. All right, well, cool. I like that. I like that. No, I like things with meaning. I like the double entendres. I like. I think this is a significant platform, right? I think it's something that is based around trying to bring our people together, talk more about the issues that affect us, and so on. So I'm very, very pleased to contribute and become a runner.
Yeah, you're a runner, man. Like we was just talking before we hit the record button. My brother, he's YouTube famous. He's hood famous right now. Although his daughters won't give him any street cred. They're like, yeah, you on TV there? Okay, cool. All right, can we watch Peppa Pig now?
I know, right, man. Whoever said that little girls wasn't savage, man, they're very savage. They saw me on YouTube about 38 seconds in. They're like, all right, cool story, bro. Back to Peppa Pig. And I was just like, you are kidding. But it is what it is. Man. It's all good.
Right. But look, I knew we had to do a part 2 because we had so much unfinished conversation. Look, between the time since then, Nigerian music, Afro Beats is taking over the world. So let's kick off our conversation with talking a little bit about that. From Burna Boy to Wizkid. I think I even saw on Instagram the other day because we know Usher has done some collaborations. Chris Brown has done some collaborations, and there's other Black Americans doing some collaborations with artists from Nigeria, Africa, all over the world. The argument was, who's going to claim who? Some people the argument is, are we going to claim Chris Brown as Yoruba or Igbo? And same thing with Usher. Like that debate had me rolling.
Yeah. No, we got to do that stuff, right? And funny enough, though, I have heard more people say that Chris Brown is more Igbo. I don't know whether it has to do with his dancing. I don't know whether it has to do with like his general demeanor. Because you do have some Igbo people that are very flashy, but you also have some Yoruba people who are very flashy, right?
So where would you put him? Where would you put Chris Brown as Igbo or Yoruba? Is he an Igbo boy or Yoruba boy?
Man, I'm gonna have to lean with Igbo. You know me, I'm half Yoruba, and my people are gonna have to be mad at me. But it is what it is, man. If you see the way Chris Brown behaves, I don't know if you could have any other conclusion. Usher, on the other hand, you see, the thing with Usher is some people would say he looks more Igbo. I mean, some people will yell at me right now, but I would actually put him more Yoruba. Because
you put him more Yoruba?
Yeah, because and let me go a little bit Niger for you. So there's a concept in broken English in Nigeria we call sweet mouth. The guy mouth's too sweet. Basically, that he's a sweet talker. And so if you think about Usher's catalog of work, this guy has been singing. The other day, me and my wife, my kids were just watching. We went back to Usher's, I think it was his first album. the one that
Right.
has that song "Think of You." I mean, he was 15, and then you had "My
Right.
Way." We were jamming to this stuff for a solid 45 minutes. My kids who had never heard this
Right.
stuff before, but but this guy has been, like basically for pretty much, more than my adult life. This guy's been singing. He's been putting out hits, so he's got the lyrics down.
Right.
So I have to
Right.
give.
He's
So
a
he
sweet
would now be
talker.
Yoruba because I don't know Yoruba man. You've heard the term Yoruba demon, right?
Right.
If you heard that, and it's like I said, I'm half Yoruba, so if it wasn't for my Edo side, that stuff would be all over the
And,
place, man. It'd be
and
like,
look, and Usher's been having the residency, and the ladies when they go there, I don't know what's
was it like in
happens at
Vegas or
these.
something?
Yeah, in Vegas. I don't know what happens with these women that go there, but they lose their mind, especially if they get on stage. It's like you just lost your
No,
your
but
wife, your significant other, and I think all Nigerian men would lose their mind if they will forbid their wife and girl to go to
uh,
this show. They're like, you
especially
will not, please.
for real, especially because Usher looks the same. Like you look at the pictures of
Yeah,
him now and him like 25 years ago, it's like this dude hadn't aged. He looks exactly the same, or 20 years ago. I can't remember which one it is. Like so there's that. But I think the reason why, I mean, I guess we're talking about women in this case that are Usher fans because I don't know too many men that swoon at Usher, but
right.
like they swoon because the guy's music. I mean, if you honestly, if I were ranking, let's even just keep it R&B, the
Yeah.
top 100 R&B albums of all time, both
Uh-huh.
Confessions and
Uh-huh.
8701 have to be there. You could make honorable mention for My Way. Like that's
Yeah.
how good Usher is. So imagine if Usher has a concert and he only does those 3 albums. First of all,
Mm-hmm.
that's like what, 35, almost 40 tracks?
That's
Because
yeah.
Confessions was
That
a
like
long one, right? Exactly.
yeah.
87 one was like 13, 14 tracks. My Way was like 12 tracks. But Confessions was like, whoa, what the hell? And I don't know. I can't remember. Like, there was a Confessions 1, there was a Confessions 2, there was skits, there was this, there was that. So he has so
Right.
much he can like kind of
He
pull
got
from.
so much
And
catalog. I heard like his show in Vegas was like 2 hours long, and people said like it was good. Like they was
yeah,
entertained the whole 2 hours. Not one down moment.
absolutely. Because I think back in those days, when someone will bring out an album, if they had,
Mhm.
I don't know if you remember, maybe like in the sort of early to mid 90s, the typical album was probably like maybe like 12 tracks, 11
Yeah,
tracks. Then after a while, it got like to 15, 18 tracks. Rappers started doing
yeah.
that, skits, this and that. But then like it's kind of come down a bit more. So you now start looking at it, and I used to kind of do a ratio. So if any album that came out, rap, hip hop, whatever, had about 2
Mhm.
fire tracks and then
Mhm.
2 other pretty good tracks. So if you had like a 40% hit rate, that was a good album.
Yeah.
Usher's albums were like 90%. And I think the reason why the women that swoon over him still do is because they hear those songs and like
Mhm.
they're going back to junior high, high school, college,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
hear those
I can see
songs
that.
and I'm thinking about, yeah, man, I remember this one time I was trying to talk to this girl. Yeah, man, I used to play this song when she came over. Yeah, yeah, you remind me, man, she did remind me, huh? You as a
Look.
dude, you know, I'll speak for myself, right? But me, I would mind map certain Usher tracks against certain times in my life with one lady
Right.
or another, right?
Uh-huh.
Across a number of years, of course, right? I wasn't out here switching lanes every week, right?
Right.
It was literally just like, indelible marks in my mind, or at least in
Uh-huh.
my conscience of when, like, that time, like, it's literally like Michael Jackson. Remember the time? I was like, oh yeah, remember
Yeah.
that time
Yeah.
we was in
Oh,
the car, we're
I
heading
like
here.
what you did there. I like what you did there.
Hey, you started with the double entendre, so I was just like, I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna run with it. Oh, I can't stop him. My
Well,
bad.
look. Either way you look at it, the debate will still go. Either way, I just love to see, which will lead us to our next conversation, black and Pan-Africans and
Yeah.
Africans working together, which is something that I'm hoping that we could get to. I know you saw something too on Instagram that we was talking about
Yeah.
akata. Well, break
Ah,
down akata for the people, for those
ah,
who don't know what akata is,
my brother.
and what you saw on
When,
the Instagram.
when I tell you this thing, you're gonna be like, "What?" So I will preface this by saying that even though I am half Yoruba, i.e., my mother is
Mm-hmm.
Yoruba, um, I skipped a lot of Yoruba language class. So I can't
Mm-hmm.
speak to save my life. I know a few words here and there. I know how to greet my mom, my grandma, that kind of stuff.
Ne.
But other than that, like,
Ekaroma.
Ekaroma, Ekaso, Ekujometa, but I can basically imitate them. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But the wildest thing. So Akata is, I mean, the literal translation is a little bit difficult, but for me, but it essentially means we use it to refer to Black people, Black Americans, African Americans in
Mm-hmm.
America, right? And
Mm-hmm.
the subtext, the derisory element of it, unfortunately, is this idea that, oh, they are not connected to their homeland. So
Mm-hmm.
you are now saying, like, look at these Akata people. It's almost like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, they don't know who they are. They forgot who they are. They behave this way, that way, which,
Mm-hmm.
is problematic, but other cultures do it as well, right? If you
Yeah.
think about when you've got, let's say, flip it the other way, and I'll come back to Akata in a second, but I flip it the other way. There was that show called Fresh Off the Boat, and I think it was
Oh
about,
yeah, I remember
yeah,
that.
it was
Yeah.
about, like, I think, was it Korean immigrants or Chinese immigrants? I think it was Korean. I can't remember.
Yeah.
But coming to America, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
those who had been in America for 2, 3, 4, 5 generations who were
Mm-hmm.
American, right? And then you're seeing these new people who come from the quote unquote old country and they're like, fresh off the boat. What do you
Yeah.
expect? Typical. So that intra-cultural thing, it's there.
Mm-hmm.
We all find ways to make fun of those who are disconnected from us. But the reason why
Mm-hmm.
I said this thing was wild was because I saw on Instagram, and my man said it with his full chest. It was one of these podcasts, right? And this is ironic,
Yeah.
because here we are on a podcast.
We're on a
But
podcast
you know what I'm
discussing
saying? But, like, hey, everybody be podcasting, baby.
it.
And this guy with his full chest was saying that, like, yeah, man, because you heard that term Akata, Akata, that's the N word for Africans, man. That's the N word. And I was just like,
Man.
all right, y'all gotta stop. You need to stop,
Man, they like
because
this. You taking it a little too far.
way too far, right? Because in the first instance, let's even just think about it for a second.
Man.
Why would Africans need a slur to refer to other Africans by virtue of their race? Remember, Akata is more of a cultural thing, as in
Mm-hmm.
you don't know our culture, you're disconnected from our culture, your homeland. It has nothing to do with race. So
Yeah.
this idea that being made fun of because you are disconnected from the whole, so to speak, right? And then now superimposing that on the N word, I think it's just like,
Mm-hmm.
a step too far. Like, I just feel like it's so unnecessary to find something else to call based on that, to call Black people based on
Yeah.
that. And it's
And,
like,
and I'll add one thing to that. I don't even think Africans are. They look in. They don't even discuss things in the term of race. Maybe tribe. Yeah,
yeah.
there's a lot of tribalism between
Oh,
Africans, but never
huge.
race.
Yeah.
Like they don't look at race in the same way that like American culture looks at race.
In fact, on that, and I like that you mentioned that, we're probably even guilty of going too far in the other direction, i.e.,
Mm-hmm.
basically not basically dismissing all the
Mm-hmm.
issues of race that are valid in America as it pertains especially to Black American, African American people, right? So, for instance,
Mm-hmm.
when you think about things around discrimination in jobs and getting jobs in the workplace, once you get a job, you think about discrimination, in education, and things like getting access to loans, funding, etc. An African
Mm-hmm.
immigrant is more likely to come over and be like, I don't get this racism y'all be talking about. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you guys are, and then you'll then have the discussion of, well, you guys are just lazy, you don't apply yourselves, and this and that.
Mm-hmm.
And the truth is, the problem with stereotypes is, if you see one element of it that is sort of true, it can be over-indexed, right? So you could meet a black American person in America who is lazy, but then you can meet people of other cultures who are lazy, other races who are
Mm-hmm.
lazy. It does not take away those systemic issues. Now, how
Mm-hmm.
you respond to those issues is a separate conversation. How you decide to
Mm-hmm.
come together and organize, a separate conversation. But it's almost like a term. It's like a way of gaslighting black people. Whereas
Yeah.
but I got a job. I've come from Nigeria. I
Yeah.
got a job. Why can't you get one? What's wrong with you? And you're
Yeah.
just
What?
like, have you listened to the person? And the thing that's crazy to me is that, because I mean, in some respects, the world's gone upside down since COVID, right? You can make the
Yeah.
argument it was upside down before, but you're hearing stories of very, very qualified people who are
Mm-hmm.
really struggling to get jobs, and this is before we even bring in things like AI. So
Yeah.
they're struggling to get jobs. There's all these issues, qualifications galore, but you'll hear people say things like, you know, like I remember I was told a long time ago, you never put your picture on your CV and stuff like that. Now,
Mm-hmm.
my name is very African. I'm Nigerian. You see my name, you know what you're gonna get. Like unless maybe
Yeah.
you might think that it's so exotic, you think maybe it's Japanese. You convince yourself that my last
Yeah.
name is said a particular way or my first name, Ighosime,
Uh-huh.
like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You put that emphasis and you convince yourself that yeah, you think it's like what is it like? Like a Japanese person saying a name with emphasis. No, it's a
Right.
Nigerian name. Now,
Right.
separately though, they have seen or found that there are some very weird coincidences between certain names in like West African culture and like Japanese names. Like
Mm-hmm.
you have names like oh my gosh, there's one in particular that is so common. It'll come to me later, right? But
Yeah.
you have all these sort of cross-cultural things that kind of appear and you're not really quite kind of sure where they come from. So it's not like it's invalid. It's because like someone actually saw my name once and they literally said to me, I thought you were going to be a
Right.
little Japanese girl. And I was like,
Oh
and
wow.
yeah, it was when
Right.
I was in high school and I went on a sports tournament.
Uh,
And so the people who were housing us, they saw my name and they thought I was literally going to be a Japanese girl. And then like, this
right.
like, whatever 5'11" kid, black kid comes in
That's
and it's
too
just like
funny.
that was not what I
And
was
it's funny how
expecting.
these different stereotypes and scenarios play out. Like, and I'm assuming that diving back into the Akata, like, is some of that stereotype you believe based on how Black and Africans have, especially when the migration that happens, have these stereotypes of each other. I wonder if that's why they feel like the N word is similar to Akata based on the stereotypes. So these people are lazy, and
Yeah.
that's a stereotype that America will portray all day, like for movies and so forth. And I noticed that
Hmm.
sometimes Africans come over here. They come over here with the colonial mindset of what Black people are in the US sometimes, which causes that rift between the two cultures, and they don't understand culturally how removed Black Americans have been removed from their own culture and been assimilated into this toxic society and systems. And so they're in a sense creating another subculture in here because they have none of their culture. Like America does a good job at stripping culture when you get here, right? From if you think of like one generation removed of being in the US, how no matter how what culture you come from, how it will strip you of your native tongue, some of your native traditions, so that you can uh be successful in the new system that you're in.
Someone was telling me, what was it? I was talking to someone recently, I think, and they were telling me that on their resume, their CV, they had their name and they're Black. Their name happened to be two, I guess you could call them Anglo-Saxon names. So let's say like your name's like, I don't know, it's like Michelle Smith, right?
Hmm.
And the person now goes for an interview and is waiting, 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 and the person, the hiring person keeps coming out. It's like I can't find this person, and then they're about to give up, and the lady gets up, is like, "So are you looking for Michelle Smith?" It's like, "Oh yeah, yeah." It's like, "Oh, I'm Michelle Smith," and the lady was like physically like she was like taken aback, like, you know what I mean? And apparently, like, the punchline was basically like, "Oh, your name was just a bit misleading," and it's just like, "Oh, it's misleading." Like,
Wow.
like exactly. You know what I mean? So it's it's really a shame because once you've kind of been through that, right? And it's funny because there are ways that you don't get that full appreciation for what Black Americans in particular have been through
Mhm.
until you really immerse yourself in some of the history. So
Mhm.
I had always had an understanding, but I would say it was almost academic for quite a while. Because
Mm.
even when I was in the States and I was in university and stuff like that, or college, um, and I knew of these things, I myself was subject to, let's even just say, racial profiling. There were probably
Mhm.
smaller microaggressions. I mean, back then we didn't really have the term for it, but there were probably smaller microaggressions that I was subjected to that I didn't
Mhm.
kind of notice, right? But it was all because it was mostly because of my orientation as, okay, an African student, international schools, all that kind of stuff, etc., coming in and just not growing up with some of these handicaps, so to speak. But I remember I was talking to my wife about this years ago,
Mhm.
and a while back, that documentary that Ava DuVernay made, 13th,
Mhm.
came out, and I don't, like I said, it was academic. I'd always understood the 13th Amendment and all that kind of stuff. I'd understood all the stuff around the Civil War, slavery, emancipation, etc. But the way it was broken down and the people that were
Mhm.
interviewed, I mean, you're looking at, like, there's like, I think Angela Davis was interviewed. I can't remember if Maya Angelou was still alive. Like, there were some
Mhm.
real heavy hitters that were interviewed in that documentary. And like, when she sat down
Man.
and she watched it, and then you now start understanding the prison industrial complex, you start understanding the laws around the difference between crack and cocaine, you understand the three strike rule, you understand all of these things. So when you hear people refer to, the late Nancy Reagan, who used to say, just say no, it's
Mhm.
nice in theory when you say just say no, and yes, that is absolutely correct, but you cannot say it without the context, right?
Man.
It's like, there's these things. So like, when you start to understand, and that comes from talking to more people and really getting into understanding the history, like when you learn about
Man.
communities like Greenwood, and you learn about
Mhm.
other successful Black communities. When people talk about, oh, Black Wall Street, you're like, what's that? And you hear about it
Man.
in pop culture, you hear about it in rap songs and so on, and you don't know what it is. And you then learn, like, oh my gosh, there was this community 100 years ago, or 90 years ago, 80 years
Yeah.
ago, whatever it was. And you're like, what? And so it's not like Black people have not been trying to figure things
Yeah.
out, to come together, etc. It's just that, unfortunately, there are times when a critical mass starts, being built up.
Man. And I and
Negative forces come in and destroy that.
And I think, something that's going to help with dismantling that myth and these challenging stereotypes and so forth is, both the conversations that we have and education, re-education, because a lot of the African in the diaspora, they're not going to find a lot of this in, typical educational system textbooks, like, because a lot of that history has been rewritten and or hidden or misplaced, so you're gonna have to find other books outside of the regular educational, at least here in the US system, to find that the context to that information or the stories from these different communities. And I often think, and then I don't know, I would love to hear your thoughts on what's gonna, like, how do we, as we start to, because this is a conversation we started to have in our first episode, talk about, like, how do we kind of bridge that gap? Because here's my belief. I believe that no institution in America is going to save Black America, and no institution outside of Africa is going to help save Africa. So how do we best work together, as Blacks and Africans around the diaspora to really invest in each other, knowledge sharing, history, and so forth, and
Yeah.
creating
Yeah.
wealth for ourselves, so that we are not,
Yeah.
we, all the wealth isn't going out of Africa, and all the wealth isn't going out of Black American.
Hmm.
And I don't know,
Yeah.
that's just my thought. Like, what's your thoughts on it?
I mean, that's a foundational question, honestly, man. And I agree with you 100%. When you talk about sharing ideas and stories, I will. So I don't know if you're aware, Disney has just done a collaboration with I forget the name of the studio, but
Yeah,
there's this.
the video, but Africa
You
can't even
you
stream it. The
you watch
Africa,
you
yeah,
yeah,
you guys
yeah,
can't
yeah.
even
Okay,
watch it.
okay. Here's the thing. Here's the thing. I saw that and I was like, and I mean, look, I'm sitting in the UK, right? So I could. It's coming on the 28th, right? Now,
Yeah.
it's tough. It's annoying, right? Now, I will commend companies like Netflix who've done a really good
Mhm.
job of being like, okay, let's get into Africa, let's get into countries like Nigeria and so on and so forth. They're doing the same with India. So they're I mean, it's not they're doing
Mhm.
it kind of like the goodness of their heart. I'm sure there is some of that good intent. But at the end of the day,
Oh, because
the
they
numbers
know,
support
like,
it.
the numbers
The numbers
support.
support it.
Like,
And
oh, this is
you
good.
want
This is a good money move for us.
hey, listen, man, streaming wars, baby. There's actually an article, is there even a TV show? There's stuff called Streaming Wars, right? They really like the fight is on between Apple, Disney, Amazon, Hulu, Netflix,
Mhm.
HBO. Like it's nuts. And
Yeah.
Paramount's in there now. So anyway,
Right.
with Iwaju, that's what um uh the show is called, right? And I think the whole idea is
Mhm.
that it's in a futuristic Lagos, which is the biggest city in Nigeria. Um, Look, for me, I think it's a step in the right direction. A lot of
Yeah.
people were mad when Marvel they did Black Panther
Mhm.
and they did Wakanda and all of that, and you could start to see the elements of different African cultures they pulled from. They were very deliberate with that, and to Disney's
Yeah.
credit, they allowed Ryan Coogler and a lot of Black and African people to really steer the ship as much as
Mhm.
possible on that film. Now, it
Yeah.
wasn't perfect. I didn't have any problems. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Miss Chadwick Boseman. I think it was really
Yeah.
clever, and I think they did a good
Mhm.
job. Um, but if you now think about the wider Marvel universe, there was a I think it was in Captain America: Civil War. They
Yeah.
had this mission they were running, and it was in Lagos, which everybody calls Lagos, which is interesting
Yeah.
because Lagos comes from the Portuguese word Lagos, which Lagos means lakes. Now, Lagos is full of lakes. So when the Portuguese came, they were like,
Mhm.
there's a lot of lakes here. Let's call it Lagos. But we call it
Yeah.
Lagos, right? Now, it
Yeah.
was funny because if you paid attention, you would have seen some stuff being like, okay, why is there a radiator, as in a heater, in a hotel room in Lagos? Anybody who's been in Lagos will tell you that it is always at least 28 degrees centigrade, right? It is hot. You never need a radiator. You need an AC. Now, that's little minute details that if I wanted to be pedantic, I focus on that and I throw the baby out with the bathwater. Or I
Right.
say, okay, here's a mission that they were doing in Lagos. It went wrong, blah, blah, blah. And that was now the basis for the Sokovia Accords and so on and so forth, right?
Right.
Now, I'm saying all of that because I want to demonstrate that you need to start building on what's there. There was a
Right.
particular year where every sitcom, there was always a line in there about a Nigerian prince, a Nigerian scammer.
Mhm.
Oh, my cousin wants to give me money, yada, yada, yada. But you
But
move
that
that
goes back to
aside,
those stereotypes, right?
it goes back to those stereotypes. But you see, again, you see that it's annoying. Then you say, okay, what are you going to do about it? And I think it was
Right.
after that. Like I remember when I saw the episode of Blackish, I was just irritated, and I was like, Kenya Barris and all y'all, Anthony Anderson, Tracy Ellis Ross, da,
Uh,
da, da, y'all have you too. It's one thing if you have
right.
like a predominantly white sitcom or multi-ethnic,
Uh,
and then there's a joke, ha ha ha, Nigerian prince. But it's like, you know what? We have to be the ones in charge of our stories and our narratives,
right.
right? So when you start to
Right.
see pockets of, you know, effort. So Iwaju is an effort of a bunch of Nigerians. There's a Nigerian animation studios. I cannot remember the name of it. They're the one that partnered with Disney to bring this story to life. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, even when you're just looking up on social media, man, come and look at comments on Instagram complaining, that's why would we, they know the reason why they don't want us to stream it in Nigeria, because there's just so much rubbish. Iwaju does not mean the future. Iwaju means straight ahead. Yes, Losiwaju, when they say you're about Losiwaju, like keep going straight ahead, right? Yes, we get it.
So
It was technically inaccurate, but what is the bigger picture here? We are seeing more representation. You're being, people externally are being more exposed. Like people, did you ever see this movie with Chris Hemsworth called Extraction? The first one was on Netflix.
I haven't seen that one.
Okay, so I said Netflix is making a huge push, right, to get content from all over the world. So I think there was one year they said they were going to invest like $400 million in India alone. And so out of that push came this film with Chris Hemsworth. It takes place in India. Comments. This isn't even India. Those aren't real Indians. And I was just like, oh, damn. Now, look, I've never been to India. I can't say, like, I grew up with a lot of Indian kids in the schools I went to, but I also similarly couldn't say that, okay, that's this or this is that. But the appreciation I came away with the film, seeing a 90% Indian cast with just the one white guy running around shooting people and getting in fights and stuff like that, not only did I enjoy it, I appreciated the effort, let's say. And you're not going to get it right on day one,
But that's why we need more of it, right?
Exactly.
We need more of it. And I think once we have more of it, once they allow the streaming, they get more cast in there, we could start to have better conversations and things be challenged and dismantle some of these myths and these stereotypes. I want to pivot us real quickly to the because another thing that me and you talked about was the little cute little boy that was giving the TED talk. And speaking of challenging stereotypes, let's dive into that clip that went viral. Hold on, I think I got it. Hold on, let me see if I can put it up here for those of you who did not see it. I will. Let me see if I can share it real quick. Where's this little boy?
There's a little English boy talking about all the resources Africa has. Yeah, this kid. Yeah.
And shout out to
Viola Davis, right? Yeah, I follow her account. She's amazing, like top to bottom.
Let me see.
She's amazing.
If this, hold on, let me.
So the potential is already there, and the growth is already beginning. Even now, Africa is the continent in the world with the fastest economic growth. The GDP per capita of sub-Saharan Africa is expected to rise by 800% from 2020 to 2050. Anyone who doubts that Africa can make quick economic progress like this should look at the economic history of the US. In 1977, the US economy was the same size as the African economy is today. And since then, the American economy has grown by a massive $18.419 trillion. And with Africa having more natural resources than the US, its progress in the next 40 years could be even more spectacular. So if you are someone here today thinks that Africa will never catch up with the rest of the world, I want to say that you will be proved wrong. With its mammoth population, massive potential, and amazing stores of resources, within your lifetime, Africa will become an economic superpower. Thank you.
And for those people who just saw that, that's just a little clip of it. I think he did like a 20 or 30 minute long TED talk that's up on TEDx, and you can Google YouTube. But in his TED talk, he like dismantles the myth of Africa's poverty, and predicts that it will rise to global power and wealth. And when you look at that clip and some of the discussions that we've been having, how do you think narratives like these will impact the perception of Africa's economic potential, especially in the realm of finance?
I think it helps. I mean, look, there
Mhm.
again, like I was saying before, you can nitpick at things, right? He
Yeah.
clearly talks about Africa as a continent, but obviously people are used to thinking of Africa as just like a country, like one body. You know, we touched
Mm.
on like the diversity between the different sections and regions of Africa, the cultures, the races, the population, and so on and so forth, right? But truly, I think Africa as a whole, Africa's GDP combined is like $2 trillion. And for context, if you're looking at that compared to the US, I don't know what US is, but
Mhm.
the US is like at least 20 trillion, right? So on a
Mhm.
slow day, the US alone is 10 times the size of Africa. However,
Mm.
um, a lot of the growth that has been seen in Africa to date has been done, over the last 30, 40 years. There were still countries in Africa that had not achieved independence even 25 years ago, 30 years ago. You still had countries that, like, actually, is that wait, what year are we in? Oh no, we're 20. Let's call it
2024.
30 years ago. Let's call it 30 years ago. I mean, like, look,
Okay.
South Africa. When was Mandela freed? 92 or so. So you still
Yeah, somewhere
had
in around the 90s.
struggles. Yeah, you had pockets of struggle on the
Mhm.
African continent up until the 90s. And what that just kind of says to you is, if you think about America, one of the biggest things that really helped America accelerate: free markets,
Mm.
capitalism, intellectual property protections, inventiveness. Um,
Mhm.
when you think about, okay, the Industrial Revolution and harnessing those inventions and scaling them and providing resources to people, transport, etc. Those things have to
Mhm.
happen in Africa, right? But you look at, let's
Mhm.
say, the telecommunications revolution. A lot of African countries have just sort of skipped a bunch of different things that happened in the West and gone straight
Mhm.
to like mobile. They've gone from
Mhm.
feature phones to smartphones. They have fast data. Many countries in Africa have relatively cheap data in comparison to over in the West. You know, many places don't have 5G, but you see quite a lot of 4G now. And what that's just allowing people to do is learn faster, assimilate
Mhm.
faster, put
Mhm.
content on platforms like YouTube, on the Facebooks, putting it on, the Instagrams, the TikToks, etc. What that is letting people do is not only get access to new markets and new information, but also to
Mhm.
opportunities for wealth creation. And so,
Mhm.
even as a lot of African countries are starting to figure out what is the balance between a free market, strong government, corruption, no corruption, um, rules and regulations of putting things into place, right? So Nigeria, for
Mhm.
instance, is over 60 years old because our independence was, 1960. But the truth is, there's still a lot that needs to get right. And
Yeah.
Nigeria's been a democracy since 1999. But
Mhm.
as far as
Still
kind
very
of like the
young.
rest
It's
of
in its
the
infancy phase
extremely
compared
young.
to rest of the
Extremely
world.
young. And I've been one of the ones who's been very impatient for the longest time, but I've had to, kind of step back and look within the context of the wider history of the world. And like, even
Mhm.
countries in like Asia, and you watch their trajectory, right? So even though countries like Nigeria were very promising 40 years ago, and when they first discovered oil and all these different things, and when the Nigerian naira was stronger than the US dollar, that kind of stuff, those things haven't quite panned out like we hoped they would have, but there is still that
Mhm.
potential for that to be the case. And sorry, 1 second. Sorry, I had a cough real quick.
Nah, go ahead.
And so from that perspective, I think that narratives like this young fella, right, in his talk, which
Mhm.
I thought was really good. I mean, for a kid, he looks like he's about 13. Um,
Yeah.
for a kid that young, I mean, in British schools and really good schools, like it looks like he went to one. They're trained on how to talk very well, how to
Mhm.
deliver speeches and stuff like that, and so you can see that training, but it's in articulating clear, cogent thoughts on Africa and the African
Mhm.
story. I think it ends up being helpful because then again,
Yeah.
it kind of forces people to just pause and reconsider and think about the things they've heard. Um, and every time they then now interact with with Africans, they kind of give people a chance, right? Instead of just assuming things, having their preconceived notions and just moving on with whatever it is that they think. And I think ultimately that's helpful.
Yeah. I want to shift our focus with that note, thinking about different things in the African contents, and shift our focus to the economic landscape. African credit ratings have been a topic of discussion lately, and I want to know from your opinion of how you assess it. How do you assess the relevance of African credit rating in today's global economy? I know we kind of discussed a little bit of it with the Naira and what we hoped and so forth, but let's talk about the credit rating, and then when you assess that, like what opportunities or challenges do they present for investors and businesses looking to engage in African markets?
I mean, oh man, anybody who says Rise Urban Nation is just a good time does not know anything, man. You're gonna get the book thrown at you. I mean, look, I'll be as frank and direct as possible.
Okay.
I mean, keeping in mind that yes, I am in credit ratings and I do work in that field. I will say at the end of the day, it's important to have credit ratings.
What?
And you have to, and even though with Africa, there is that idea that it is ultimately making things more difficult, I'd like to sort of not caveat actually, just offer another way of thinking about things, right? Because when you say, okay, credit rating, fundamentally, what are we saying here? Is that when you have debt obligations that you will pay back, and the function of you paying back is sort of predicated on your underlying financial strength, the strength of your economy, the strength of your systems, your governance, and so on and so forth. So if you had two friends and each of them asked you for $100, and you knew the behavioral differences between the two, and it was like, we give it to person A and person B, and person B was 3 times as likely to pay you back. Then if you gave each of them $100, right, you would just know that person B has, a much higher credit rating from that perspective than person A. And you may go ahead and write off what you've lent to person A, but with person B, you're getting that money back. And so and this is like the simplest of ways of thinking about it, right? But essentially, investors need to understand how they should think about the countries they lend to. And this is through the issuance of mostly Euro bonds. But it's still it's a debt obligation, right? And it still needs to be paid back. So at the end of the day, they need to have a view. The view should also be from a common framework. So rating agencies have standard formats at which they assess all countries. And, where I guess it's difficult for Africa is that historically Africa has been, well, it just hasn't had the strength of the other countries like in the West or in like the Far East, etc. And we all know the different reasons for that, and we can have that discussion separately.
Yeah.
Now, having said that, within the African continent, you do have some countries that are very strong, and by strong I mean above investment grade. And what you then start to say, okay, how do those countries get there? So what's the strength of the institutions, their economy, how diverse is it, etc. All these are the things I mentioned before. And then you say, how do we improve? How do we start getting to the point? Because the truth is, you mentioned something earlier about, okay, no one coming to save Africa, African countries. And I'd like to sort of, kind of mention President Nana Akufo-Addo of Ghana, who, every time he kind of goes on one of these big big international trips and he goes to these conferences and forums, he says, look, we're trying to move from Ghana to a Ghana beyond aid, right? Ghanaians are not beggars, Africans are not beggars. Think of this as a business opportunity. Don't think of it as you're just throwing aid money at us and then a few people just kind of take that money, trickle out a little bit for the masses and then take the rest for themselves. We need to start looking at African countries as places to do business. Now, maybe there needs to be some education around how that's done, right? And as time goes on, more and more people will emerge who can tell those stories and can help people think about opportunities in Africa, right? And the different nuances from one country to the next. Doing business in Rwanda is very different from Morocco, and so on and so forth. And so within those sort of pockets, you can start to understand things a bit better, because there are also as many investors and companies there are who have fled certain African countries and who are, it's too risky. There's, just as many, or maybe, 75% as many who have had success and continue to have success, and they figure things out even with difficult operating environments. So, to say that credit ratings in general are not required or don't work well for Africa, I think it's a bit much. I can understand having points to critique, and that's, let's have that discussion. But ultimately, the systems, institutions, processes, things basically need to be refined, and in some cases put in place to get to the level where you call yourself an investment destination, where you become attractive to a wide variety of capital sources, and a lot of that will come from Western countries, and some of them, Asian countries. And so, it's tough, but these things kind of have to be done.
I think too, because I'm thinking about just even the little bit of business that I've done in Nigeria from using virtual assistants and so forth. Like, that education is big. That's a big key, because this how you do it here in Nigeria may be different from South Africa, and how you do payment systems and set up stuff. Like, it's like. And it could even change. It could be like this one month, and there's going to be something totally different the next month. Like, I think if we could standardize something, or the education process, to make it more simple, because I'm trying to think of what can we do on a more smaller level for, like, let's say if we had a couple of 100,000-aires and up, or millionaires in the Black diaspora that want to invest and do business with folks in Africa, and vice versa. Like, how do we make like, where are the areas of opportunity for us to do business with each other, like in your eyes, at a smaller level, and then continue to build on that until it becomes a massive thing?
A great question, and I'll start by answering that by talking about information asymmetry. I mean, you learn about perfect competition, and one of the things about perfect competition is the availability of information. One of the things that makes Western markets, capitalism, if you will, effective, is because, by and large, most of us, we have access to the information. It's on the internet somewhere. It's in a library book. It's this and that. By and large, people can find the stuff that's needed, right? You can put something out today that I see, and an idea occurs to me a completely different way, and I can go there and implement it in another way, right? In a lot of African countries, you then now have information asymmetry. When you're on the outside looking in, you're not aware of a lot of the contextual, cultural, country-specific dynamics that could make or break your business venture. And the way you get around that is honestly baby steps. So I'm not saying, start by investing $100. I'm saying don't even invest, right? Don't invest cash, invest time. So, it's kind of like there's this joke. Let's use Nigeria, right? There's this joke that Nigerians are
Mhm.
everywhere, and if you see a Nigerian in a country, you see in Nigeria, the most random country, don't be surprised, right? But then by that same token, if you go to a country you don't see any Nigerians, get the hell out, right? Because there's something wrong. You know. Now it's a stereotype and it's a joke, but there are elements of truth to it, right? So, for instance, if you're someone who's like, "Oh, I want to do business in Nigeria," it's like, well, I'm sure if you walk about 5 minutes that way, you'll find a Nigerian and you ask them
Right.
questions and you ask again and you
Right.
ask again. It's like you want to go to the United States for the first time. I want to go to America. You go and find people who have been. Hey, come. Have you ever been to New York? You have been. Is the
Oh yeah.
Empire
Oh yeah. Come.
State Building as good as it is? Okay. So where is the Big Apple? Can we eat it? No, sir. The Big Apple is the city. Oh, really? You ask questions and you start to learn stuff. And you get to this point where you build up enough information where you feel confident that I go, okay, I think I know what's going on now. I can venture forth. And so when you've asked enough questions, you can say, you know what? Let me go visit Nigeria. I got this friend over here. Okay, he's going to set me up. I'm going to meet people that are. You get in there, you dip your toes, and you start to meet people. You shake hands, this and that, and then you start to get more confident. It's like, again, the States, depending on who I ask, you go like, man, there's a shooting every week. They're always killing people, blah, 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 blah. And those shootings are there and people are getting killed. It's unfortunate. But, having lived in the States, I also know where I'll go. And I know that the likelihood of said shootings is very, very low. I know the dynamics, blue states, red states, guns rights, no gun rights. Actually, that's not true. Everybody's got gun rights. But the point, with the point being like, I think California has done some stuff recently on making things a bit tougher on the gun side of things. But the point is, once you have that context, you start to gain a bit more confidence, right? So I'm not going to, I'll fly to wherever in the States tomorrow, most places, right? And I know I don't have any fear because I've been there, I understand things. So, I have that level of comfort. It's the same way, the other way around. You want to do business in South Africa, you want to do business, and even for us as Nigerians, right? Like I if I've never been to South Africa and I'm like, oh, I want to do something there, blah, blah, blah. I mean, one of the first things I have to do after I ask a bunch of questions, I need to go there. So I think there is that element too for Africans in diaspora who want to do stuff. At the very least, find you some Nigerians that you can talk to about stuff. And to be fair to Africans,
they will be happy to talk to you. They will talk. They will talk to you. Please, I assure you.
No worries, no worries. And to be fair to Africans, there is more information that's becoming more available online. So I mean, it'll get there, but I think it's just that thing of trying to demystify, different African countries, demystify the continent as a whole by talking to people and watching content, again, like we're talking about Netflix, you'll find Nigerian movies on Netflix. You'll find, other South African movies, you get so much good stuff out there. So it's really just immersing yourself in it and getting comfortable.
Yeah, immerse yourself in it, people. You heard it here first.
Yes,
And
swim in the African waters. Swim in the river of your ancestors. Stream.
My brother, it's always a pleasure to catch up with you in conversation. Let's close this out. We'll in the spirit of immersing ourselves and collaboration, between the Yoruba and the Igbo and our brother Chris Brown and Usher. Give some last words of wisdom of what you hope to see in collaboration in the future, or ways that you feel Pan-Africans in the diaspora can connect with the motherland.
Wow. I want to see collaboration on all fronts, man. I want to see more business collaboration. So one of the things that has made the news in recent times is one of the OG, not even just African, but Black investors in America, Mr. Bayo Gulesi, just sold his company, Global Infrastructure Partners, to BlackRock. and I think he walked away. Not like walked away. He's still going to be involved in the business, but now it's under the BlackRock umbrella. But I think his net worth is now like 2.5 billion. Now,
Wow.
I want to see, how do we collaborate in a way where in 15 years' time, there is a business or a platform that has either a mixture of Black Americans or Africans in diaspora collaborating with Africans on the continent, etc. You talked about no one is coming to save Africans. So if we take that approach as given, we say to ourselves, that premise is given rather, we say to ourselves, okay, then we try and figure ourselves out and try and do business together. Then what does it look like when we have that kind of collaboration, such that in a certain amount of time you've built up another infrastructure business, an agriculture business, clothing, textiles. Like, there's so much that can be done, right?
Yeah.
The resources and the capital is in the West, but the people, when I say resources, the economic resources, right, from that perspective, but like the more traditional resources, the people resources, and even just the new territory, right? Because there is an opportunity for those who know to try and establish things in Africa to kind of build up knowledge, competence, capacity to be able to produce businesses that are quite considerable. And so that for me is, I know it's a more boring business one. I would like to, I'd love to say, I'd like to see this artist collaborate with that artist and all that kind of stuff. But there, a lot of them are already doing it. I mean, apart from the Wizkids, the Burna Boys, the Davidos. I mean, you've got this lady Thames, from Nigeria. She's been incredible. She's been absolutely incredible. And then you got Tyler from South Africa, who I think just won a Grammy. You've got some incredible people. There's incredible artists from Ghana. There's people from, and we're not even talking about like Francophone Africa. So people from like Senegal, and I think maybe like Mali and so on. Like, there's some really talented people out there who their stuff needs to be heard. And maybe we collaborate by featuring more of the music in movies, but also featuring them in, like commercials, featuring them in shows, right? So what do, I guess you could say, Real Housewife, series look like? Or, maybe other black focused TV shows and movies. What's Tyler Perry saying? Is Tyler Perry going to come here and come to Africa and say, look, let's shoot some stuff in the motherland, right? Let's go to a country that we think is safe in Africa, shoot there, and there's so many stories, right? So it's just about the willingness to do it and the exposure and the engagement. And once we start talking and, we start, throwing ideas around, I think we can make many, many, many things happen.
Yeah, I think so too. I just saw something come out the other day that Shola shared with me from the BBC sharing Pan-African stories of Nigerians and Africans in the UK and British, and they sharing the real stories, like these famous people. So I love that. I want to see more stuff like that. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up another insightful episode of Rise Urban Nation. A huge thank you to our guest, Ighosime. My brother, you always come with the fire and the energy. We love it.
I appreciate that,
and thank
man.
you for,
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you for coming back on and just shedding the light of the dynamic world of African finance and just, sharing your story with us. And I want for anybody who tuned in, just to remember to subscribe, share, tune in next time. And as we continue to explore the pulse of the diaspora and all the stories that we have. Until then, keep rising with us.
Thank you. All right, take care.